4, 5. That's all we need. Call the meeting to order, and if we could have a roll call.
Committee members Wolf. Here. Hintermeister. Here. Hutchison. Here. Lyons.
Here.
Edgerton.
Here. And I'd like to say that Dick Oliver is off fishing. His sons called him up the other day and said, "Dad, pack your bag, we're leaving." And he says, "But I have a habitat meeting." And he says, "No, you're going," and he's gone.
Where's he at?
Expects us to believe this.
Yeah, exactly. I'm out fishing. Yeah.
Who's going to pay attention to that?
I don't know where he's going, or even if he knows, but his sons took him.
That sounds like fun.
Oh, it is.
Can I go? Do you mind if I?
Yeah. Well, he doesn't take a day off from work, and he's building a subdivision behind where I live here in Morgan Hill, and we've exchanged cell phone numbers and everything, and because if there's a problem, I call him. Okay. A report of the chair. I have no report to offer, but in fact, I've missed the last two governing and implementation board meetings, but much of the stuff that we're going to be looking at, the other two boards have looked at. And does anyone on the board have an announcement, anything to say? Hearing none. Public comments, items not on the agenda. Anyone from the public? Okay, so now we get to turn the page. I would entertain a motion to, in a second, to approve the minutes of the February 1 regular meeting.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Is there a second on that motion?
I'll second it.
Thank you.
All those, so the motion received unanimous approval. Item number 2, review development fee adjustments for the fiscal year 2018-19. And if Ed, are you the?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm the presenter. So it's an automatic and inflation adjusted mitigation fee increase that was approved by the board back when we were first incorporated as a new agency. So it's an automatic increase, and it's going up 5.3% for fees, land cover, serpentine, and nitrogen, and those fees go towards land acquisition. And then burrowing owl and wetland fees go towards burrowing owl management and restoration and habitat creation on the aquatic stuff, and they went up 3%. So the 5.3 is based on a weighted average of CPI and the housing index, for the metropolitan area. And the 3 is based specifically on the CPI for the statistical metropolitan region, SMA.
And this typically is how other agencies like this one have a cost of living based on?
It's different than the first HCPs, like the ones in San Diego, Orange County, but yes, it's similar to the one in Contra Costa, and I don't know about the ones in Riverside County. I'm not sure how they do it, but I know Placer County, where I used to work, is going to do it this way too.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions, suggestions,
You want to go first? I'll wait.
comments?
Yeah, I had a question. I mean, I guess I'm just trying to understand the big picture here. I would assume that the fees are meant to more or less track, especially since we kind of calculate it separately for land acquisition, that they're supposed to kind of follow more or less the land acquisition costs, because, so my question is, from your perception of having to kind of deal with, buying land, are the fees kind of tracking what you see as your costs in terms of, when you're negotiating land deals and that type of thing? So do you feel like you're getting sufficient, or are you getting too much money
no.
To account. Yeah,
And Kyle can probably speak to this too, or if Dick was here, Kyle being a rancher and knowing the price of agriculture land in this county's grazing land or farmland. There's a property on the Pajaro River area that we may acquire, and an appraisal was done, not by us, but by Nature Conservancy. And it's pushing 11,000 an acre for, I mean, it's bottom land, it's very clayey, cropland. And Rancho El Toro, which was probably one of the cheaper pieces of dirt that we've looked at, sold, I think, for just under 16,000 an acre, which is, or 1,600 an acre, excuse me, which is expensive for, from what I've been told, for land that a rancher would want to acquire to make, to pencil out. So I don't know if the fee, I know when you go into North San Jose, in the Milpitas area, no, I don't think our fees are keeping up with the cost of land there. So that area between Mount Hamilton and Fremont and Milpitas and Berryessa, no, I don't.
well, I guess then the follow-up question would be.
Yes.
Then, I mean, are we as an organization kind of looking at that issue? Is that just a temporary thing, or is that like something that's now built into our plan that is going to defeat the land acquisition goals, for example?
It's a challenge, for sure. We're going to go through an audit process starting this fall, and it's to see if we are charging enough for fees. And I will bring up this, because these fees serve many purposes. Endowment, so 10.35% goes towards endowment. 1.2%, which is not much, goes back to paying the co-permittees, reimbursing them for their investment of money and staff to put the plan together. And then that leaves what, 88%, 87%, that's supposed, 88% that goes towards acquisition, land management. And right now, we don't own a lot of land, so land management costs are pretty low. But when we start acquiring a lot of land, that's going to be a big question for me, is how, if we buy a piece of land where we got to rebuild roads and do a lot of stuff, then so far we've avoided those types of costs. So it's a great question. My gut tells me no, but I could be wrong, so that's why we go through the audit. I could just be shocked by what people pay for land around here, and maybe the fees are enough, but I have my doubts.
Is that audit something that we would routinely do, or is that kind of a special thing, just kind of triggered by?
It's an episodic event every 5 years, I believe. I know the first one is 5. I'm not sure if the next one is year 10, but yeah, it's supposed to happen periodically.
Is that something that we would review or have a chance?
Yeah, no, you guys will definitely be involved with this. Yeah.
Because I think,
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at that, I mean, I think that's definitely something that, you know, the organization as a whole should be a little bit concerned about. Because those numbers, I mean, just based on, you know, what your own experience and what you read in the papers, it just seems really small.
So the development community would say these fees are enough. So it's sort of balancing that too.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. And since we don't have anyone from the business community here today, I will say that.
But I think that'd be a very worthwhile discussion to have. With the facts, you know, from the audit.
And to tell you about our fees, I know developers, medium to large size developers, they just like writing a check and not have to deal with the delays that they used to have. But I do feel if the complaints we get are from somebody who owns a 20 or 40 acre parcel, typically in the county, but there's some of those in the city of San Jose and Morgan Hill too. So it's someone building one house on a set amount of acres, and if it's on serpentine, then the fees are very high. So we do get complaints on our fees from people like us who aren't developers, and they have concerns. the serpentine fee is high, but it's try to get, but the goal is to try to get people to avoid impacting it because of the plants and the butterfly. Yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. I mean, I think that audit would be really, really interesting to
Yeah.
kind of understand what the connection is with the fees and land acquisition costs.
Julie, did you have something?
Yeah, just quickly, first of all, I wanted to thank you for your write-up on this. I thought it was very thorough and really easy to understand.
Good.
Yeah, because I remember when we were looking at what indexes should be used for the development fee increases, I know that was a real back and forth on that. With regards to the 5-year periodic assessment, it's my recollection, but you should know the plan better than me, that it was supposed to be every 5 years for exactly
Okay.
that purpose.
Okay.
Was to really understand, is there enough money going into the plan for what needs to be done? So yes, I do look forward to finding out what comes out of that. The only other comment I had was, and this is totally me, going through the report, the one thing I would have liked to have seen was a year over year.
Oh, sure.
Because
We
just
can
think,
put
I was
that in
just
next
thinking
time.
about Dick,
Yeah.
how he would say,
Yeah.
I mean, I know you're making it very clear what the increase is, but sort of being able to look at that dollar amount, especially when you're talking to the development community, what kind of a jump have we seen over the years, is really kind of nice to see year over year, how much it has been the increase over the 5 years.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's just the
Yeah.
only extra I'd add.
And it was higher the first couple years, I remember. I think one year it was, I believe, close to 9%. So, yeah, I think that's a great idea. And the audit will also look at, are we collecting enough money for the endowment? That's one of the other things it looks at.
Just a couple things, in following up on Julie's, that I think I'd like to see year by year for each of the last 5 years and do that every year, because that gives you more than a snapshot.
Sure, 5-year?
Yeah.
Sure. Yep.
And then, in my role on the Gavilan College Board, we are on the cusp of moving to what they call a basic aid district. That means up until almost now, we had been funded based on the number of FTE, full-time equivalent students. Because the land valuation down here and in San Benito County in the last 3 years has continues to zoom upward. We're going to move to basic aid status. And so that means we're going to be collecting more money based on property tax revenues than we were able to get from the state based on the FTE. So all of this area is I don't have the percentage number, although Fred could give it to you off the top of his head, but it is it's and just looking at my property tax bill, it's gone up, and it's gone up a lot throughout the entire region of the Gavilan district, and with San Benito also in there, that's been much slower to develop, but they've got 5,000 homes in the pipeline right now.
San Benito does?
Benito does.
Does that include, what is it, Florino, the old Rancho San Benito property?
I don't know what it includes.
Okay.
But it's, and it goes, you never know what's going to happen over in San Benito County.
Agreed. Agreed. We rarely, I rarely interact with them. Occasionally, I'll meet a supervisor from there at an event. But yeah, I don't know, So it's kind of a mystery, at least for me, on what's going on over there. I know it's growing.
Yes, and as you saw in traffic coming home just now. Okay, so anything more questions? Okay, so thank you for the report.
You're welcome.
You don't need a motion to accept or just
No.
move on?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, item number 3.
So this is, I'm going to go over with you all the presentation I gave at the budget workshop. Okay. So where do I, okay. Click that off. Okay. All right. So this is the same presentation I gave to the joint board meeting on March 15th. I thought it'd be good for you to see this too. And we can go over the budget after that if you guys want to. So the outline of this is sort of to look at the agency's accomplishments, goals and objectives for next fiscal year, and a summary of next fiscal year's budget. So the key accomplishments are program management, land acquisition, management and monitoring, western burrowing owl, habitat restoration, and permit integration. And I just want to give a shout out to my staff. Tara's here tonight, but all 4 of them, without their involvement in helping the agency and me succeed, a lot of this couldn't happen. So program management. So we have these governing boards, the PAC. We write memos because the plan was it took 8 years, but at the end it was a mad dash to get it done and reach compromise on some things. So some things aren't very clear and some things need interpretation. So we write memos to try to help both the wildlife agencies, ourselves, and the co-permittees with implementing conditions of the plan and language within the plan, both from the conservation side and from the permitting side. So plan modifications, that kind of falls into the same category. Tara is going to give you a presentation on the annual report, so that's part of our permit compliance. We finally concluded the property donation from Caltrans and the Pacheco Creek one. We meet with NGO communities, secure foundation monies, and so I've met with the Moore Foundation, Resources Law Group, and the Resources Legacy Fund, which Packard's helped fund. So we're trying to get foundation money to help with land acquisitions and restoration. We had good success with Moore, and we're going to use some of the Packard money for El Toro, but unfortunately we were unsuccessful in acquiring that property. The Friends Group is now created, so we've created a 501c3. We just got the paperwork from the state that said you are now a 501c3, so we now have a not-for-profit arm, a sort of like a sister agency. And originally the purpose of that was to invest our endowment in the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. I think you all probably have seen the recent news, so that's something we're going to talk to the Friends board of directors about. I talked to Wasserman on the phone yesterday about it. And so that's stay tuned on whether the endowment will be invested that way or not. But creating the 501c3 will still be valuable. It allows us to go after grants that only nonprofits can go after. If somebody wants to more comfortable donating to a nonprofit than a government entity. So there's still value in that. But a big reason we did it was for the endowment investment. Because by being a 501c3, it gave us more control over the money we would have invested with them. We continue to do training to co-permittee staff. And then this, read it at your leisure. It's in your packet, but these are kind of a lot of the public outreach stuff we would do. We had their San Jose Conservation Corps crew out at our Pacheco Creek property today doing weed whacking. So that's cool, and they're helping us out. And we've worked with the STRAW program, which is through Point Blue, working with local schools. And the projects we've worked with STRAW on have been schools have come from Hollister and the Gilroy area. So I think those are two highlights. So from a financial side, we had our fourth audit successful. It's part of your packet tonight. We did another AB 1600, that's a Mitigation Fee Act report, shows how the nexus between the fees we collect and how we're going to spend that money. We hired a CPA to advise on and oversee fiscal functions. We hired a new CPA firm to perform fiscal audit for the next 3 years. Accounts payable and banking function transitioned from the county to the Habitat Agency, so our banker is Chase, but now we're doing all what the county used to do in-house now. We're saving money and efficiencies by doing that. Our next step is to kind of move away from ADP and do payroll in-house. I'll talk more about the grants in the grant update section and also a little bit more when I go over the numbers in the budget. But the reason why our projected is so different than our actual is that our Section 6 grant is being held up in Washington right now. All Department of Interior grants, $50,000 or greater, are going through an audit process by the Department of Interior. And in the EOS stuff, I'll get into that in much more greater detail because it ties into to the Washington trip that I'm going to give you an update on also.
Could I just ask a real quick question? Just curious as to why you want to go to in-house payroll.
We had a lot of problems with Levity and with ADP.
Okay.
Mistakes.
Okay.
Yeah, it was kind of shocking, actually. And the mistakes are less frequent, but it was just, we're paying you all this money to get us in trouble with the IRS. That was a Levity. And with ADP to make lots of mistakes and just a lack of training with ADP staff that creates a lot of and how the computer does things and generates things and how staff just doesn't seem to understand how to correct the problems. Yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Because
Yeah,
we've switched to ADP over at the core, and I'm not in charge of it in any way, so it's a question of curiosity.
I was surprised. I did not expect that because I know they're one of the big guys.
Yeah.
So.
And then in-house, do you have somebody prepped to do this in-house?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and we'll be using our Black Mountain software platform. So the transition will happen around Christmas. That's when we were planning on doing that.
Thanks.
So because we were awarded a Section 6 grant, but we haven't received it. And WCB matches Section 6 grants, Wildlife Conservation Board, through the state. And so that's why we projected $4 million, but the actual's only, so we're still in limbo land. We might get the money. It's confusing on what's going on. Because the program has bipartisan support. Congressman Calvert, who's a Republican from West Riverside County, he supports this. Congress appropriated the money, so I'll tell you more later. Stay tuned. So I'm projecting $10 million in revenues from covered projects, and we projected 5.5. So grants aren't as robust, but revenues were. We have currently about 9.3 in revenues, but based on projections, I think we may get another 700,000 between now and the end of the fiscal year. And that's due largely to projects in Gilroy and a couple big projects in San Jose that we kept thinking were going to happen, and well, finally they did. So one of the complaints we got from co-permittees was the lake and stream bed alteration agreement integration. That's another state permit through the through the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's also called 1,600 permit. And when you do work in the stream zone, they call it, or you're impacting wetlands, you got to get a permit from them. And they were adding additional conditions on the projects that were covered by the NCCP. So we worked with them, and we're in the, this memo should be the new guidance before the end of the fiscal year. So I appreciate that, that they worked with us to kind of recognize that they shouldn't be adding additional conditions on the projects when those projects are covered by the NCCP, unless it's something we don't cover. And there's things we don't cover, then it's appropriate for them to add those conditions. We're now doing a nitrogen deposition only. There's some big projects in San Jose that should be paying the nitrogen deposition fee, and San Jose recognized that, and that's now projects of a certain size who don't trigger habitat fees in any other way are paying nitrogen fees because of traffic that's being generated from it. Riparian temporary impacts determination and for restoration projects, because sometimes restoration projects take multiple years, and our temporary fee is pretty clear. If the project lasts more than a year, you pay permanent fees, which kind of is counterproductive for a project where a component of it is restoration. So we updated the, and this was agreed to by the wildlife agencies, that if a project so usually construction is just a window, so it's 365 calendar days total. So if the project lasts 2 or 3 years, as long as the dewatering or the disturbance is not more than 365 days in total, where there's going to be an improvement in the habitat around the project, either through direct restoration or enhancement, then they only have to pay temporary fees. So if they're cutting down a big oak tree, that's a permanent fee. But if they're only impacting invasive species or annual grasslands or something like that. So this is a way to try to make the fees a little less burdensome on projects that have a net benefit to the environment. And that's sort of the second memo there is sort of dealing with the same stuff with in-stream projects and dewatering. There was some confusion on bird surveys and the way that it was written. We were requiring people to trespass on their neighbor's property to determine whether least Bell's vireo or tricolor were there, and we changed the protocol that said, if the feature is on your neighbor's property and you can't get permission to go on your neighbor's property, just get some binoculars and see if you see the birds, because there's some avoidance criteria that an applicant has to do if there are nesting birds. And the avoidance is mainly the timing of when their construction project can begin. So that was a good thing. So these are some of those modifications I was talking about. Another funding source for us is the Water District and their D7. And finally, Julie, I think I spoke to that large group that you're part of, how many years ago? Yeah. 2 at least, where I think we're finally going to start seeing some of that money. Wow. And we've been working on an MOU with them, and I'm hoping it'll get completed this fiscal year, but if it doesn't, earlier than that. And given a lot of interest by people to sell their land at this point in time, their money will come in handy. And we negotiated an MOU with the OSA, which was signed by their board at their board meeting in April. It's going to our board in a couple weeks, and now we have a formal MOU with them, which kind of solidifies our relationship with them, which is a good thing because they're not a co-permittee like county parks, so it's a good thing to kind of establish some parameters and kind of a collaborative protocol with them. Yep.
The conservation easement template update?
Yes. So it was just, thank you. It was just modifying some of the language in the conservation easement. It's still referred to California Fish and Wildlife as Fish and Game, and there was also some editorial changes. It wasn't any substantive changes, but we still had to have everybody sign it again. So all the 6 co-permittees had to sign it again, 2 wildlife agencies. Even though the changes weren't significant, it still went through this bureaucratic process to everybody sign it. So it's something that was seemingly simple, but not.
Just want the clarification on the nitrogen deposition fee only application. Was that just to streamline the application process because
Yes.
it's really burdensome to go through the general
Yes.
ones? It's just, okay, just this box tick, a few things, and we're
Yeah,
off.
and to cap, because there were some projects that they said, oh, we don't have to do anything. So they were unintentionally avoiding paying fees. So it was two things. There was a
Okay.
couple big projects in San Jose that
Slipped.
should have paid that fee. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, I'm sorry, just one quick question. I mean, I don't want to go into it in any detail, but the MOU, you've sort of really broad brushed that
Yes.
MOU with the OSA.
Yes.
We don't have to go into it now, but I'd like to just understand it a little bit better.
Yeah,
If
definitely.
you want to carry it to another meeting, that's fine.
Yeah, I can talk about it.
Once the board's approved it or
Yeah,
before.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And part of it has to do with, they're doing the RCIS program, so that they talk to us, we're engaged with them on that. It also dealt with the plan identified lands that they own that would be enrolled in the reserve system. So we talk about that. We talk about working with them on land management activities where it's appropriate. But yeah, I'd be glad to share that, more details with you on that. Yep.
So who identified that nitrogen deposition only project? As a-
Dave Johnston.
Ah, good job.
Yep. Yeah. And part of it had to do with our writing comment letters on projects in the non-participating cities. And he says, because nitrogen was one of the issues, it's primarily, so we wrote a comment letter on the precision plan in North Shore, and Mountain View ignored us. But Apple paid the nitrogen fees. There was a couple other projects in Sunnyvale. Cupertino has been good about sending us notices of when development's coming in. Santa Clara in what's that big project of theirs where they're doing the whole new, over by the stadium? Forget the name of it.
Related project.
Yeah, thank you. So we wrote a comment letter on that, and they are going to address nitrogen impacts. So Dave said, well, if you're going to do that, then there's these co-permittee projects that aren't currently, because everyone was looking at that 2-acre minimum but it's really a half-acre minimum, and when you look at nitrogen, it's really a no-acre minimum. If you have a 50-story building that's generating 10,000 traffic trips, it's where one home in the county is paying nitrogen, and one can argue vehicle miles traveled versus being connected to transit and all that stuff. But if you don't pay the fees, then justify why you're not. Maybe because you are linked to transit and you are reducing traffic generated. So it's not a given that they'll pay the fees, but they can't ignore it. But Dave was the first one to brought it up. The planners in all the cities were very open to this. It wasn't like we got pushback, go away. So it was an oversight. Yep. So we have 4.5 FTEs. We now have a safe harbor plan, and this is why we got in trouble with the IRS with levity for our 401K. I'll be glad to talk to you about it offline and what a problem that was, but it's been solved. I've been learning a lot. We updated the handbook. I mentioned we have accounting, financial, and legal services. We still have ICF help us out with as needed. We have DUDEC working on integrating the 401 permitting into our RGP and habitat plan. The county, we're paying for a third time, 30% of a senior real estate person is helping us through county parks, is helping us, and she's been great. We work with the county for GIS, and we work with consultants and a broker on land transactions and various restoration projects. So I mentioned Pacheco, so that's now, this is a picture from the property. It's now, we are the owners of this 55-acre property, which has led to some dialogue with the surrounding neighbors about potentially us buying one property and putting an easement over another. I don't know where either are going to go with it, but you know, we wrote a letter saying we're your new neighbors, and we have good neighbors. We're lucky.
Is that upland property or additional bottom land?
It's bottom land, yeah.
I know that is.
Oh,
but
that
the additional you're talking about.
yes, it both.
Oh, both.
Both, yep. Along Pacheco Creek and along Harper Creek, which is just south of Pacheco Creek, flows into it. So negotiations continue with the wildlife agencies for placing conservation easement over Clara Park. I think we made a lot of headway with the county recently. I don't know what they tell you at the park commission meetings, but things were at loggerheads for a while, and
Yeah,
things
I'm
are.
not on the park commission anymore.
Oh, you're
so
not?
I'd be
Okay.
interested in-
Okay, yeah. So the recent, I'm optimistic this is going to happen. I wasn't so sure. Land negotiations, Lamont has sort of fell off the cliff, but I put it on there. It may still happen. Gonzales Ranch, which is also the Bajaro Ranch, it's a TNC-owned property. UTC, and then Sargent Ranch. We put in a full price offer with Post, TNC, and the Land Trust of Santa Cruz, and $32 million, I believe, and they turned it down. All of it. Yep. It's the quarry value that's the problem, to be blunt. And in fairness to DACA, Debt Acquisition Corporation of America, who has a controlling interest in the property. It was an investment property for people. And they bought up a lot of the for pennies on the dollar, from what I understand, when it went bankrupt. So they bought out a lot of the investors. The value of the quarry is significantly more than, but it's speculative value. But they feel the appraisal they had issues with it, from what I was told. For me, yeah, I was just sort of a funding partner. We were, the agency. But I'm not sure if Post and TNC are still talking with them. Yeah. There was talk about just acquiring part of it, but TNC and Post thought it was important to try to acquire the whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, they had some real concerns about the quarry itself. And I can't comment on it because it's a pending county project, but it definitely would change things out there. Negotiating a land in lieu of fees agreement with the San Jose wastewater facility, and even talking about buying the buffer lands out there with them. And it's an evaluation thing again. They think it's worth this, I think it's worth that. So, but we are moving. I had a really good call with them the other day, and things are moving forward. So part of it will be enrolled in our reserve system, and hopefully we can acquire the rest of it over time. But we do have a management agreement with them to manage the land for owls, and they've agreed to extend that management agreement another 10 years. So I mentioned the Section 6. We'll talk more. So this is where a lot of the work that Tara's involved with, a lot of this stuff. She's done a great job on kind of being the manager and the program manager over this side of the shop. So she's working diligently to complete the management plan for Coyote Ridge Open Space. And that's something we can bring before you and talk to you about it too, sort of, it's this thick, but at least we can highlight some of the things that will be done there. We've done plant surveys at Clara. We also did amphibian surveys at Clara. We tried to get Nomad to come to this meeting to present to you on their findings out at Clara, but they'll be coming in August. They're too much field work for them right now. But the good news is there's a lot of rare plants out at Clara, as we sort of suspected. There's also yellow-legged frog out at Clara. So we're really eager to get this property enrolled in our reserve system. Year 3 of the Coyote Ceanothus creation project, which is being headed up by the Water District, and in particular their botanist, drawing a blank on her name, Janelle Hillman. And she's been doing a great job. It's a very expensive project, so I applaud the Water District for trying to do this, but it's showing with these rare shrubs or rare plants in general how hard it is to try to, I mean, there's a reason why they're rare. And you can't be like Johnny Appleseed and expect it to happen. And then there's the threat of Phytophthora, that plant pathogen of killing them. So we're continuing to do surveys at Coyote Ridge, and this is a picture of some of the work that was done at Calero Ponds, where there was over 400 CTS that were found there. And we also did an invasive species eradication project to get rid of bullfrogs and crayfish in that pond. So it's quite initially people thought there were nothing there. Well, there's pond turtles there, and which Tara will talk to you about in the annual report, and there's CTS out there. So, and it went from just a handful of CTS to hundreds of CTS, with 2 breeding cycles too, besides, which I didn't know they did that. But part of it was a very wet year. We can't take all credit for it, but I think by improving the conditions there, we've helped. Western burrowing owl, we continue to do the surveys, the fee zone update. I mentioned in doing a management plan with the regional wastewater facility, and ongoing management agreements, negotiations with others, the airport being the big one, to try to do a management agreement out there. We're going to have to start initiating Tier 3 activities, which involves, we have to get approval from the state to do this, which involves captive rearing of chicks, potential translocation. The birds are not doing well. Their numbers of, the preliminary findings is that their numbers are lower again this year. We'll have to wait and see what the final survey results are. But we're sort of all in with now trying to do some more intensive conservation actions to turn around the population. And we're going to travel to British Columbia because they're very big into the burrowing owl, captive breeding, captive rearing, and we're going to try to learn on how they do it, Calgary Zoo and all that stuff. So habitat restoration, 4 habitat restoration grants submitted, 2 of which I'll talk to you about today. San Felipe Creek construction, which Tara is the project lead on that. It's restoring over a mile of San Felipe Creek and Grant Park, doing seasonal wetland creation and restoration and a lot of other neat things. Coyote Ridge, we're working on restoring 2 ponds there to benefit the amphibians. And then this picture here is Gonzales Ranch, where we worked with the straw program to do, it was a TNC project that we helped fund. And you can see the kids right there from Gilroy, and then my daughter is the one with the hat on. And those kids were from, not Gilroy, Hollister. And they were at our Pacheco Creek property this past spring doing the same kind of things they did out at Gonzales. So then you can see some other projects that we're scoping out, and they all involve multiple partners.
See the high-speed rail project mitigation?
Yes. I added it to the EO notes to give you an update on it. I forgot to include it, but I'm going to talk about it.
Great, thank you.
I was out in the field with the regulators today on that very topic. Not just me, Post was there, TNC too. So this is about permit integration. So we have the regional general permit, trying to integrate the, and then I should stick to the script instead of jumping around. So we currently have 3 applications in, and possibly, I guess we count San Felipe Creek, it might be 4. So people are using the RGP, not as much as we had thought. And we're trying to get advanced mitigation credit for the RGP and the Section 401 permitting, and the regional boards seem to be very open to giving us advanced mitigation credit. And these are some of the projects. Clara, we already got some advanced mitigation credit. We're trying to get them for those other 3. Guadalupe River is just in the, is a project that was initiated by the city of San Jose, not us. We've been having some really good meetings with NOAA Fisheries about streamlining the Section 7 consultation. So we will talk about fees. We will increase our stream fee, in-stream fee, if you're affecting steelhead. And then we'll take that money and focus on a steelhead restoration project or a fish passage improvement project. And so they've been great to work with, and this is, I'm expecting this to happen. We're working through creating an in lieu fee. So the habitat plan is an in lieu fee plan. Somebody comes in, they write a check, and we have time to buy land, restore the land. Right now with the RGP, we're like on a hamster wheel. We have to get ahead of everything, advanced, always got to be ahead. So it's challenging to always be ahead of take or impacts. So we're working on developing an in lieu fee program with the Corps that'll be just like the habitat plan, where we can collect the fees and then work with the Corps to do restoration projects that kind of align with the impacts. And this is the real kind of, when you get to the top of the hill, if we ever get there, is integrating the 401 permit process. That's with the regional boards, the water boards. If we can accomplish that, I could probably retire, but we've had very productive discussions with them, but that's a steep hill. They have a very different way of looking at the world than we do, or even the Corps does, a fellow water regulator. I'm not saying I disagree with their look at the world, but they do, it does create a challenge. But we are making progress. The RCIS, I can talk about that if you all like. It tires me out to talk about it. But we're trying to ensure that it's consistent with our HCP and CCP. And it's kind of a parallel process, similar to ours, but for projects not covered by ours. And it's a pilot project that the Fish and Wildlife Service state is trying to unveil across the state. It only covers state permits through the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And I wish they hadn't chose our county as to do their pilots, because it's taken a lot of time of my staff and me to make sure this is not in conflict with our plan. So goals and objectives. Well, we want to acquire a property, and I'll tell you, I'll get into a little bit more about that when I'm in the EO report. And also, we love to do a management agreement with the airport, and for owls, we're working with OSA, because we got to have a site. If we're captive rearing chicks, got to have a site place them on. And the Coyote Valley open space property is a really good property for that. It has squirrels, it's got a lot of foraging habitats, so we're working with OSA to try to set this up. I mentioned San Felipe Creek. We're hoping to get to construction this soon. One of the challenges is getting a permit from the water board on this project, and once we get that, we can start construction. It's the same problem on Coyote Ridge. The Friends Group is established, and then I should have updated this slide. I don't know if we're going to invest it in the community foundation. Submit another Section 6 grant. Well, we'll see if they even bother to put out solicitation for funding. Even though Congress appropriated the money in the 17-18 budget, they have yet to solicit for submittals of applications. We always talk to people where people are probably tired of seeing me begging for money. Local assistance grants have been great for doing scientific research. We'll apply for a couple more of those. I'll talk a little bit more about restoration. 401, of course, we'll keep going for it, and hopefully the other integration with the in-lieu fee program will be approved by the interagency review team. That's the one that the Corps is involved with. Section 7, I'm cautiously optimistic we can get that done early next year. And we've created a national coalition. Some of those members joined me on the Washington trip. So we want to strengthen that group because we need red states involved in promoting this program. Continue to advocate in Sacramento for NCCP funding. This is an area that we've had some fits and starts with local universities. I wish I had more time, my staff had more time, but that's an area that we hope to improve upon to get them to help us with research. And we will continue to work with STRAW and San Jose CCC. Okay, so now this is a little bit about the budget. So these are projected, so the column on the left is the ones that, when we were here last year, this is what we thought was going to happen. This is estimated actual. So as I noted, I said I think our fees will be $10 million in mitigation fees coming in. So this is estimated actual as of a couple weeks ago. I did not update it yet. So, and the big reason of that is a couple big projects in San Jose came in, and that's why we thought it was 5.5. It's actually going to be closer to 10. So our budget estimates, I'm being conservative. I think we'll have about $5 million in fees next fiscal year. And the grants are high because I'm hoping that the Section 6 grant that was supposed to be awarded this year will be awarded next fiscal year, and that we'll get WCB funding to match it, and we'll get the water district money. So that's where that $6 million came from. So we're total estimated revenues of 11.1 million, and that's where we came up with that number. Do you have any questions on any of this? And these are guesstimates on where we think the fees will come from, based on some preliminary input from our co-permittees.
Only a question around the grants, because grants are such a tough thing. Is there a plan B, or it's just shelve and hope for the next year?
I would say it would hope. One thing we're going to, Senator Feinstein's friends with Senator Murkowski, so I'm spoiling what I was going to tell you at the EO report, so I won't tell you. So we're hoping she's in charge of interior appropriations, so So we're hoping that Feinstein will call Murkowski and say, hey, Calvert, the Republican congressman from Southern California, has met with Department of Interior saying, what's going on? I met with Panetta and Lofgren when I was in Washington, and then we met with their staff of the other two Congress persons and the two senators. And so Panetta being new and Lofgren being, a veteran, Panetta kind of laughed. He goes, they don't return my calls. And this is the administration. Lofgren said, I've been in Congress for all these years. We can write a letter, but they don't return my calls. They don't respond to our letters. It's a different world. Kind of that gentlemanly approach of treating your colleagues with respect, the administration and the cabinet being responsive to members. I mean, I didn't meet with Republicans. There were other people that did. I did meet with Republican committee staff members, and they're supportive of this program. They know it works. The Department of Interior staff is the ones that are lower in the food chain, and I met with a political appointee who's supportive of this program. So it's coming from Secretary Zinke, and this non-responsiveness. I mean, he was a congressman. I don't understand why he doesn't show his colleagues, to be blunt, doesn't return their calls. I think it's inappropriate. But we're trying to put a bipartisan letter together. There seems to be some willingness to do that, to free up the money. Maybe it'll get freed up before that. From what we were told, there's $5 billion in grants that are being reviewed by one person. He's a appraiser from Montana he's known Zinke since kindergarten. And it's an impossible task for one person to review all grants 50,000 or over. So I put it in there, but yeah, the good thing is that we got a park and water bond, Prop 68, that's coming up before the voters in June. If it passes, it has $52 million for NCCPs. It has more flexible allocation of the cap and trade monies, and it has money for the Wildlife Conservation Board, which we can apply for competitively. So, it takes a while for bond monies to get released, but if the voters pass it, that maybe can help out with some of the funding shortfalls that may be. So my colleagues from Texas have been helping us, and these come from conservative counties in Texas, are helping us to try to, because they believe in this HCP stuff too. And I was there with two county commissioners from Williamson County. It's as conservative as any place in California, and they are on board with this. People from Florida, we're starting to figure out, well, we need to get Rubio involved. They met with Senator Cruz. A couple of years ago, I met with Congressman Carter, who represents Williamson County. So it's the administration. It's not Congress. Yeah, it's not Congress. Yeah. Right. Hopefully that'll make up the water district money. Maybe it'll, if you're still on that board, whatever you can help. So, and then working more closely with Post and OSA, and that's why that MOU is important. Sure. And these are sort of the categories of expenses. So you can see we thought we were going to have 3.6 million in expenses. And actually, estimated actuals, let's say 2.3. It's a little less than that. And the big reason was because the delays associated with getting these, the construction project that Tara's been working on, through no fault of Tara. It's getting the permits. We have to go through the same permit process that a developer does, and when we're doing a restoration project. So we don't have to get permits for endangered species, but we do have to get permits from, the Corps isn't a problem anymore, but the water board is they're very thorough and highly critical of projects that are doing some sort of modification, even if they like the project. So, so that's why our expenses in that area are probably $1 million more than the previous year's estimate, because it's that money that isn't being spent now is going to be spent next fiscal year for the San Felipe Creek restoration. Administrative has gone up a little bit, and then technical permitting is gone up a little bit from what we budgeted last year, and part of that is related to, we really are starting to ramp up this integration permitting, and we're also going to be doing some database improvement work too, to create a management information system that when somebody's doing monitoring out in the field, they can have a tablet and everything will be in real time.
Could I ask a question?
Yes.
On this one?
Yes.
So this has already been reviewed by the elected boards?
Oh, no.
Or they haven't seen this material?
Yeah, no, whatever comments you have, I present to the implementation board. So I presented this as a budget workshop.
Okay.
But we're presenting, I just wanted to go over this with you, because we're presenting you with the budget that we're going to recommend that the governing board adopt. So you are the first that are going to be
Okay.
seeing that.
Well, I guess I would just maybe ask one question now. You answered one question I had, which was that, part of the reason the actual conservation spending in the previous fiscal year was low because of some permitting issues.
Yeah.
But, the follow-on question to that would be, so you've planned, a major, a large conservation strategy spending in the next fiscal year that would, that would planned anyway, plus these additional projects, assuming the permitting gets taken care of. But, do you have the staff on board and, kind of everything capable or available to actually spend the money that you're looking to appropriate that fiscal year? Because that's,
Yes.
that's a large
I,
sum of money.
yes, so if this, more than half of that is these two restoration projects, Clara Ponds and San Felipe. So that'll be pushing almost 2 million, those two projects, so 2/3. And then the Burrowing Owl program's in there, so that's done by not my staff. Yeah. And the restoration projects, Tara is overseeing one, Jerry's overseeing the other, but we have consultants that are doing the lion's share of the work, construction companies, and we got people to help Tara with monitoring and construction oversight and all that. But yeah, it's a good question. It came up by Kat Tucker, Councilwoman Tucker brought it up. Do you have enough people?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
that's kind of a common
Yeah.
question to ask
Yeah.
when you see something like that,
Yeah.
where you're kind of going, well, we'll
Yeah.
make up for it next year.
No, it's a fair question. I think if we start acquiring land, then the answer is no. Yep. It's definitively no. But so if we'd acquired El Toro and this Claro thing that wasn't taking forever, and then yeah, we were going to have a paradigm shift. We were going to go from land rich to cash poor, relatively. So we were going to have to figure out, well, I need somebody who's in charge of land management, oversees what Parks is doing, what OSA is doing. El Toro, we were going to own it outright. We would be working with a rancher to graze it. So, yeah, and having the rancher do some things, and we wanted to keep the ranch hand who was there, the ranch manager, we wanted to keep him on the property, and so we were going to pay that salary that the Mathis family was paying. So yeah, we were going to start adding staff. So we also have that county real estate person who's now working for us 30% time. So she wrote 2 grants for us, and she's helping me with the real estate stuff, which I'll talk about in the EO report.
Because the other
Yes, go on.
question I would ask,
Yes.
kind of again, a higher level
Yes.
question, is, when I look at just like this chart and look at the mix of administration versus conservation strategy money.
Yep.
Right, so, I'm not criticizing administration fees because, we have, small staff, and
Yep.
so that's kind of to be expected. But, looking back at the 50-year plan, if we look back at that to kind of look at what the plan was for administration versus, conservation strategy, do you think we're tracking with what the plan had for that kind of mix of?
Yeah, the plan, so for the first 50 years, or 40, for the next 45, so the plan talked about 10 to 11 FTEs. And we're at 4.5 now. We're starting year 5. So, so the plan did talk about more people, yes. I don't remember, do you remember the administrative
I
number?
can answer this.
Yeah.
I've been looking at the numbers a lot because I've been working on the annual report. And part of it is how we show our staff. And so Ed, Jerry, Jill, and I are all under program administrative. That's all of our costs are there. But I spend most of my time doing conservation strategy implementation. And as Jerry probably spends a quarter of his time doing that as well. And so you're not actually seeing, so it looks like we're spending more on program administration just because that's where that's where we put the costs of staff rather than in conservation strategy. If we look at,
Okay, so I see, so this is really looking at kind of like job designation.
yeah, like how we,
rather than kind of what-
so if we look at like what the plan assumed, and how we're actually spending our money, we're spending less. But if we look at the proportion-wise, over time, we're about accurate. If we look at the acquisition of Coyote Ridge, for example, in our program.
Yeah, because I would suggest that maybe, I don't know what kind of is appropriate for these kinds of charts or these kinds of presentations. But, just, I'd have to say that kind of looking at this and kind of looking at the administration versus conservation strategy, I would say that's not a real good look. And maybe, we should present numbers that are more, or at least have them available to kind of address that particular issue, that actually, in terms of the functions that are being performed, it's not as administration versus, field work as it kind of looks like in this chart.
Yeah, no, it's just looking at administrative as in the costs to have employees
Yeah.
versus what they were doing.
Right.
I know Jerry and Tara would hate me if I suggested this, but when I worked when Jerry and I both worked at Placer County and Tara as a consultant, you did things by project.
Yeah.
So your time was assigned by project. And some of Jerry's time is reimbursed through participating special entity applications and regional general permit processing. But but like Tara said, it's probably 80 to 90% of her time is spent on category 3. Mine is probably more administrative than any of the other 3.
I think being able to show that would be
Jill's
would be
100%
good.
administration, yeah. Yeah, but
Whether
it's, yeah, we could call it something different too, because it's really salaries, is what we're talking about. Yeah, it's, and how those salaries are, but you think this looks bad in your
Well,
in
I
your
just,
mind?
so I'm on a board of a nonprofit, right?
Yeah.
So they're always looking at, what is the administrative expense versus,
Yeah.
so it's kind of a different world.
Yeah,
But, when I look at, this chart, that's kind of what comes to mind.
yeah.
I don't know what our elected boards, what kind of things they're thinking of. But, just looking at this chart, I would be surprised if there weren't questions about, along those lines.
They haven't, but that doesn't, I know if it jumped significantly, they'd have issues with it.
Yeah.
But they would look at it differently than the way you do. They would say, oh, you added 3 staff people, and they wouldn't care if those 3 staff people, 100% of their time was category 3. They would look at it that I added 3 staff people, and that would be their concern, not what they're doing, it's just the cost.
Yeah.
So the way you're looking at it is optics, and you say, I'm uncomfortable with it, and part of the optics is how we describe it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we can describe it potentially differently.
Yeah, if I was just a kind of random member of the public, which
Yep.
I kind of am.
Yes,
And, was just, concerned about where our dollars are being spent.
yes,
I would go, gosh, we're, spending 25 to 50% on administration. And, I would call a reporter.
yes.
So that's, but you're saying it's a perception issue, and that's maybe something, I don't know if it's worth, if no one's questioning on the elected boards, but I would
That doesn't
certainly-
mean you shouldn't question
Yeah, I
it.
certainly would look
Yeah.
at that and kind of wonder.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's why you're here, to question, and you all, I think, drill down a little bit more than sometimes they do. So, but so you're looking at estimated actual, and it is 50%. Yeah, yep,
That's not just optics, that's reality, and that doesn't look good. And so, I mean, I can see Mike Wasserman asking that very question.
This time he didn't, but maybe he will in the future. Because I shared these numbers with them. These are the exact same numbers. So they do understand that part of it was we couldn't spend the money. So the other part is we have a lot of money in the bank right now because we've been trying to buy land and have been outbid. On Richmond Ranch was a Chinese investor. By El Toro was a neighbor who's a billionaire, I think, who Edmund Jin, who bought it, and he loves horses, so it's a great horse property in some ways. But so part of the balance looks wacky because we got a bunch of money in the bank and we didn't buy any land. Because if we bought land, the estimated actual would be, 20 million. For El Toro was 19 plus, 19.5 million it sold for. So it would be a completely different story we'd be telling you. Well, we bought El Toro and that was a cost to buy that property. I mean, it's asset accounting. You buy land, it's worth something too. So how that comes out on the balance sheet. But yeah, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, it's that, and it includes legal services, financial services, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Doug, you're our member of the public. Do you have any questions, concerns, or observations? Okay, thank you. Ed, does that pretty much sum it up?
That pretty much sums it up. This is just another chart that you can take a quick look at. It shows some of those things you were talking about. And we will submit this to the governing board in June for their approval. So, any additional questions?
I
I do.
Yes,
Back to the El Toro.
yes.
It sounds like you just had your mindset on purchasing it, and then it would go into your system. And I'm assuming that'd be like your crown jewel, instead of a plan to sell off the development rights to recoup some of your money.
We hadn't thought about that on El Toro, but other properties, it probably would be, like there's a property we're looking at in the Santa Cruz Mountains. I can't say which one, but there's a house and a vineyard associated with it. We would sell that off, or maybe try to partner with somebody. They'd buy that, we buy the rest. There's a property along Pacheco Creek. If we do buy it, we'd sell the house and keep the acreage that's not on the house. El Toro, I hadn't even gotten to thinking about, because he had all those homes.
Yeah.
Todd had all those homes out there. And one of them we were going to let the ranch manager continue to live in, Justin. And then the nice house that Todd and his family lived in, I hadn't really gotten to that point of thinking about what to do with it. It crossed my mind, but the rest of the, most of the rest of the acres we were planning on keeping, but it was a lot of the same type of acres, so maybe over time we could have sold it to a rancher with a conservation easement over it. I hadn't, we never got to that point of thinking about that, because then with our easement over it, it might make it affordable for a rancher to purchase it, yeah.
Or not even have a ranch manager and just have a person come in and bring their cattle.
Yeah.
And they manage it for you
Yeah.
instead of you paying someone.
Yeah, it was more of a short-term thing to have Justin out there, eyes on the ground, but that's something definitely we were going to think about doing out there.
Because I guess they're going to turn those houses into bed and breakfasts.
Oh, is that what they're doing? Okay. No, we hadn't thought about that one. That would require me hiring more people.
Well, I don't see how that's going to work on that turn to get in and out of that place.
It's dicey, because I went into that property, I was on there twice, and that's interesting that's what he's thinking of doing. I wouldn't have expected that from him, but he's into this ecotourism thing, because he's got a YouTube video, which is his philosophy on life, and so I could see he would want to take people out there. So, okay, interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, move on.
I'm next. So I'm next with the annual report, and I can probably go through a lot of it pretty quickly because Ed covered a lot of a lot of things from last year as well. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about our annual report for fiscal year 16-17, which is almost an entire year ago. But for our permit compliance, we report on the fiscal year, and we report on different metrics than what we report to for the boards and for our budget and for our planning year to year. So you might see numbers here in here that are different than what Ed presented on, because we track different things based on what the assumptions were in the habitat plan. And some of the reporting we do is about, did we guess right when we put together the habitat plan? Are the things that we assumed so? Other parts are, how are we making progress towards achieving the biological goals and objectives? How many projects are we permitting? Are we conditioning them correctly? These are all the things we track in our compliance. And I'm not going to go over all of them. I'm going to stick to the top 10 today. If you want more details, you can read the annual report. So in the last fiscal year, we covered 54 projects. We acquired 55 acres of land. We confirmed the presence of 13 of the 18 covered species, either on Coyote Ridge or on the Clara Conservation Easement area. We have 5 restoration projects across 4 watersheds, 1 pilot plant creation project for Coyote ceanothus, 201 new acres under management agreement for the western boring owl. We assessed our compliance with the all-important stay-ahead provision, which I'll talk more about during the,
Excuse me,
yes.
could you move away from the mic a little bit?
Yeah, I know,
It's easier
I'm
to
quiet,
understand.
I'm quiet, so I don't know. Okay,
Oh,
all
it's real scratchy when
Okay.
you get too close to it.
right.
Thanks.
We earned 3 grants totaling about $1 million, or were awarded about $1 million of grants. We had $4.6 million in reporting year revenue and $3.1 million in expenditures. So the covered projects, where were they? For private projects, we had 8 in the city of San Jose, 5 in Morgan Hill, 9 in Gilroy, and 10 in Santa Clara County. For public projects, 1 for city of Gilroy, 1 in Morgan Hill, 3 in San Jose, 2 by county fleets and facilities, 1 by county communications, 8 by county parks, 3 participating special entity projects, and 9 completed by the water district. So how does this look year over year? So the first reporting year, I'm going to call them the years 1 and 2, 3 and 4. It's just easier for me to do it in saying the fiscal years. And for years 1, so for years 1 and 2, we had 54 projects. So that was like a first partial fiscal year plus an entire fiscal year. We permitted 54 projects that had about 500 acres of permanent impacts and 41 acres of temporary impacts. In the third year, we permitted 57 projects, 601 impacts of permanent impacts and 117 temporary impacts. In this past fiscal year, the 4th year, we had 54 projects. And you can see that while the number of projects remains constant, in this last fiscal year, we had about less than half of the physical impacts. And you'll see this later reflected in the revenues collected for those projects. So cumulatively, most of our project impacts are happening in agricultural in the yellow and in urban areas in the gray, with just about less than about 20% happening in natural areas. And that's also going to be affecting the fees that we collect for our projects. Yeah. This is so you don't have to read the report.
I'm curious about the agricultural. Do you know if that's mainly like within the county, like those are county projects that are
I haven't
impacting the agricultural lands?
I haven't really looked too much into where those are occurring, but I can look into that.
It's just a question of
Yeah.
curiosity. Who's impacting those? Who's the more
Actually-
guilty party impacting?
I
those
can,
lands?
I can answer a little bit of it, because some,
would
it's
say-
like it's classified as Zone B, which is ag, but it could be abandoned ag. So some of the projects in Morgan Hill are abandoned ag. Meadow Fair, we'd have to look at it, but it might have triggered Zone B fees.
And Meadow Fair?
Evergreen area, it was a big open area, still within the city of San Jose.
Okay.
And there was some old walnut orchards in San Jose that got converted. So we're talking, Meadow Fair wouldn't be counting this year, excuse me. So last year, San Jose, some of that development around Cottle was old orchards.
Yeah.
So it would have triggered Zone B.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah, and I
That
know
would
Morgan
explain it.
Hill, some of the projects here are triggering, they're Zone B fees.
Yeah.
So we look at it a lot coarser than, but we could drill into the applications more.
I mean,
Yeah.
it was just simply a question of curiosity because there was so much of that land impacted, so I was
Yeah.
just curious who.
Yeah, it's a great question. In this case, I know in Morgan Hill and San Jose, it's old ag land versus the stuff where Kyle lives or
Sure,
South
sure,
County or
And that's why I was
Yeah.
asking, is it county
Or even
projects that are
county
impacting it,
yeah.
or is it more just exactly within cities that have old ag lands that they're
It's,
finally?
it's primarily the latter, yeah.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
within city limits that there's development occurring. Yeah, okay, thanks.
I have to click through everything to get back. Okay. And the same is for temporary impacts. Most of them are, because they're associated with the same projects. In gray, you can see in yellow, most of them are happening in agricultural developed lands. And so when a project is impacting developed lands, like urban or suburban, or like redeveloping or infilling, some of them don't pay any land cover fees at all, and they're only paying the nitrogen deposition fee. And so, like, I'm only going into this now because it affects the fees we collect later, because you're like, why do we have all these projects and less fees? And that's why I thought. Okay. So Pacheco Creek Reserve, here's Jerry. This is where he was today, as was Ed. I was working on the presentation. The Pacheco Creek Reserve was formerly a Caltrans property and was given to the Habitat Agency last year. And it provides habitat for 9 of our covered species. So California tiger salamander, red-legged frog, foothill-legged frog, and the western pond turtle. 3 birds, the western burrowing owl, tricolor blackbird, Lisbell's vireo, fragrant fritillary, and then the San Joaquin kit fox. It also has 2 undercrossings on the property, which will be the subject of an upcoming wildlife permeability research project that we're initiating along Pacheco Pass. So it won't only be our property, but looking along Pacheco, along Highway 152, how permeable is it, where are animals crossing, where are they getting hit? And hopefully we'll pick up our own pictures of mountain lions and badgers. Yes.
Is that serpentine, that area?
No, but it's modeled habitat for fragrant fritillary.
Well, that was my question. How'd that get there?
We haven't found it, but it is potential habitat for
Well, I
the,
thought that was serpentine endemic, so.
I guess there's some flexibility where it's found.
Okay.
Or it's a blip in the model, one of the two. It might be a blip in the model. Oop. We're also, another one of our studies, this is the third sycamore alluvial woodland studies. The first one was LAG funded, the second one was funded by the Water District, and this third one is also funded by the Local Assistance Grant Program. They'll be doing a study of how far away do native versus non-native sycamores have to be from each other so that they don't interact, and how close are they when they do interact. So looking at where can you get native sycamores. We also have a run of steelhead on the property. Steelhead? Mm-hmm. Steelhead on the property during wet years.
So last year they were spawning just upstream of our property.
We've already initiated a restoration project with the straw program, and we're grazing the property in a limited way.
The Burdettes, I don't know if you know Lacey and Wyatt.
Yeah.
They came out and grazed it for us. We asked them to because it was so overgrown with thatch and stuff.
Okay. So we haven't done any surveys at Pacheco, but we have done surveys at Coyote Ridge and the Clara Conservation Easement, as well as the 2 locations under management agreement, down Edwards, and then the regional wastewater facility. So, good news is we have Bay checker spot butterfly, California tiger salamander, and western burrowing owl, both at Coyote Ridge and the Claro CE. Across those 2 properties, we have 1 core habitat unit and 1 satellite habitat unit of bay checker spot butterfly. For the tiger salamander, we have 6 occupied ponds or wetlands, and for the western burrowing owl, we have two breeding sites, one at Don Edwards and one at the regional wastewater facility, and 2 overwintering sites. For red-legged frog, California, we have the red-legged frog in 2 ponds breeding on Coyote Ridge. We don't have any red-legged frogs at the Calero Conservation Easement area, but they are breeding on the neighboring OSA property, Cañada de Oro, and we have a restoration opportunity that's within dispersal distance of that pond. So we'll be working with, when we do our next project out there, we'll be considering that site to bring the frog onto the property. So both foot-hilled frog and western pond turtle are found on the Clara CE. We have the foot-hilled frog on 2 stream reaches, and then the western pond turtle is in 4 ponds. So the plants, these are more fun because you actually can see them when you go out in the field. So Santa Clara Valley Dudleya, most beautiful jewel flower, Loma Prieta Huerta, Mount Hamilton thistle, and smooth lysyngia are both Coyote Ridge and at Calero. For Santa Clara Valley Dudleya, we have 105 occurrences, and this is using kind of our old metric under the habitat plan occurrence definition. For most beautiful jewel flower, we have 5 occurrences, including 1 new occurrence. For Loma Prieta Huerta, we have 4 occurrences, including 2 new ones. Mount Hamilton thistle, 15 occurrences, and smooth lysyngia, 4 occurrences, including 3 new ones.
Can I stop you just, when you say that they're new, qualify that a little bit?
So we say new when it either wasn't accounted for during habitat plan development, or there was not a CNDB record of it. And so it wasn't extant at the time the habitat plan was developed.
So can I further, so an occurrence, I mean, I've been up there and can find multiples of some of these on a single hike.
Correct.
So when you say smooth lysyngia, 4 occurrences, there's probably 1 billion individual plants up there. So I don't understand what an occurrence is.
So per the habitat plan definitions, we define occurrence that is a quarter mile apart from the next individual. So on Coyote Ridge, that is a single occurrence. That is a big problem.
Okay, so that's my question. I mean, there's so much of it up there,
Yes.
especially
I mean,
this
it's a big problem that we're working with the wildlife agencies to resolve from a compliance standpoint. At
okay.
Calero, it's not, the habitat there is not as contiguous. And so so you'll have more smaller occurrences at a site like Calero County Park, where your serpentine is more patchy compared to Coyote Ridge, where it's contiguous.
So is there any way to adjust that to make it reflect the reality? I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
That's what we're trying to do,
Okay,
like Tara alluded to.
okay.
So we're going to, abundance needs to be considered. 5 plants being taken doesn't equate to 28 million being protected.
Okay.
Yeah, and we're working through them, with them on that, hopefully.
And everyone's
Yeah.
been agreeable. We brought up the TAC, and they're like, okay, they're like, this is not a problem. And so everyone is on board with finding a solution.
Okay, good.
And the funny thing at Calero is that there had not been actual lysyngia entered into CNDB yet, so we get to count that as a new occurrence, even though there's millions of plants up there. It's kind of exciting. For fragrant fritillaria, this was exciting because we've relocated all 3 occurrences on Coyote Ridge. Our first year of surveys, we only found 2 of the 3. And the 3rd year, we found the 3rd occurrence, which was thousands of plants. So that was pretty exciting. And then Metcalf Canyon jewel flower, we have 1 occurrence at Coyote Ridge. And a lot of this is how you slice and dice it. And so we're working with the regulators and with our technical advisory committee of creating these conservation equivalents. So we have how we track it for our baseline assessment for status and trends. For example, for Metcalf Canyon jewel flower, I think we say we have 8 occurrences for our baseline because of the distance. But for compliance, we use a different metric. And so we're working to resolve that. Because our compliance for status and trends are different. One's a natural metric, one's a paper metric. Okay, so then we have some opportunity species. So Coyote cenothus, there are 4 occurrences of Coyote cenothus, and we're required to create 2 occurrences, and the Water District is taking the lead on that project. And so they're working their property on Coyote Ridge to do a Coyote cenotes creation project, which you've talked about, and Janelle will be presenting that in August to you guys. For Tiburon Indian Paintbrush, there's an occurrence on Water District land as well as waste management land, and we're working with Creekside Science to both do a census and some exclosures by doing a census of both populations, and then exclosures on the Water District property populations to test the effectiveness of that, because they've noticed that their browsing is an issue there by both cattle and by deer. For tricolor blackbird, we have a few opportunities with the Water District and OSA to protect habitat and enhance habitat to encourage the species to establish breeding sites in the county. For leaf spells vireo, again, there's opportunities to partner with the Water District, OSA, and at Pacheco to do restoration projects specifically targeting the species in South County. And then for the kit fox, we have opportunity at Pacheco. Our connectivity study will be able to detect if we have the species on that site. And with high-speed rail, because of their impacts, we'll be working with them on designing mitigation for kit fox as part of their project in that region. Okay, so restoration. We've got 5 restoration projects that are either active or completed, and even the active ones are being monitored across 4 watersheds plus the Coyote cenotes project. And so in the Guadalupe watershed, we have the Clara Wetland and Pond Restoration Project. At Grant County Park in the Coyote watershed, we have the San Felipe Creek Restoration Project, as well as the Coyote Ridge Ponds project. Down in the Pajaro watershed, we have the Gonzalez Ranch or Pajaro Ranch Restoration Project we did with the Nature Conservancy, and then we have our own project at Pacheco Creek in the Pacheco watershed, and then the Coyote cenotes project on Coyote Ridge. So both the Coyote, the wetland and pond project at Clara is now complete, and we've entered the monitoring and maintenance phase of that project. And also the Pajaro Ranch hedgerow restoration project is also complete. So both those projects are in a maintenance and monitoring phase. At Coyote Ridge, the Coyote cenotes creation project is in its test phase 3, and that was initiated in 2016, and we're still in that phase. For the Pacheco Creek Reserve, the riparian restoration project was initiated in 2017, and we're continuing to work with the Point Blue Straw program to do plantings there. At Joseph D. Grant County Park, the San Felipe Creek Restoration Project is slated for construction either late spring or early summer this year. We have, and you asked about management of that project and staffing. We have Habitat Restoration Services is our contractor, as our builder, and Balance, and as well as Dudek, they're a team, as well as Balance, who is the designer. And so Balance will be on site overseeing implementation of that project. And then for construction management, to assist me so I don't have to be out there every day, because it is a remote site, we have Rachel Kish. She'll be overseeing that project, as well as Richard Harris. And so we'll have an on-site construction monitor each day on the project site. We'll be having on-site project meetings with county parks every Tuesday. And then I'll probably be out there once or twice a week, depending on the project phase. So that's how we're going to manage that project. It's very remote. There's not really self-service. And this is our game plan. I might have to be out there more often if things, depending on what we're working on there.
Is this in the upper part of Grant Ranch, like by the Twin Creeks parking area out to the north?
No, it's off the it's off the Stockman lot, and it's on the Corral and Hotel trails.
Oh, way down there. Mm.
So it's the it's called Hall's Valley.
Oh yeah, so it's
and
down.
it's the Snell.
Okay.
It's the upper and lower Snell pastures. So the Corral Trail bisects the project. Is at one end of the project, and then it's downstream from there.
Thanks.
And when said and done, this will be about $1.7 million project between design and construction permitting.
Great, thank you.
And then on Coyote Ridge, based on the species surveys we did, we identified 2 ponds that historically had supported our covered amphibians, and that are either failed or don't hold water long enough to support them now. And so we're restoring 2 ponds on the ridge top. And that's slated for construction this year as well. Okay, stay ahead. The most complicated, uninteresting thing that I have to present on. The stay ahead provision is a way to track that our conservation achieved is ahead of the impacts accrued. And so everything in green means that we are in compliance with our stay ahead provision. And so our stay ahead compliance ranges from just over 100% to 3,000%. For conifer woodlands, we haven't had any impacts, nor have we conserved that property or natural community. And so what do I mean when we're ahead in acres? So for the habitat plan assumes we're going to conserve or restore so many acres of each natural community. And so we say that what percent have we achieved, like where are we in that percentage? So let's say I have to preserve 100 acres of grassland. If I've incurred 10% of the impacts, I have to have conserved at least 10 acres of grassland, and then I'm in compliance. Full compliance with the stay-ahead provision. We're actually allowed to dip below 10, be 10% out of compliance, but we're not going to go there. So for grasslands, we're over 100 acres ahead. For chaparral northern coastal scrub, 5 acres ahead. Oak woodlands, 4.2 acres. Riparian forest and scrub, 54 acres. Wetlands, and these are going to seem small for the aquatic ones because the impacts are generally pretty small for these as well. Or 0.8 acres ahead. For ponds, 0.4. For streams, we're 13.7 miles ahead. We're doing okay there. For burrowing owls, we're 704 acres ahead. We also track stay-ahead compliance for plants. So the number of occurrences protected compared to that number that can impact during the permit term. So for Tiburon, paintbrush, and Coyote ceanothus, we don't have to track stay-ahead compliance yet. For Tiburon paintbrush, we never do. We aren't allowed to impact that species. We only have conservation requirements. For Coyote ceanothus, we start tracking it this next year if we're in compliance or not. And we have to have created a population within 5 years of the first impact of that species. And so currently we've impacted just over 500 plants, and then we are implementing that Coyote ceanothus creation project to offset those impacts, or we can acquire an occurrence. For Mount Hamilton thistle, fragrant fritillary, Loma Prieta hoyta, and Metcalf Canyon jewelflower, we have had no impacts. So we're ahead on those. So we're 13 occurrences ahead of Mount Hamilton thistle, 3 on fragrant fritillary, 2 for Loma Prieta hoyta, and 1 for Metcalf Canyon jewelflower. For Santa Clara Valley Dudleya, we've actually achieved our compliance requirements for protection for that species. And so we've protected 99, and we're 94 occurrences ahead. For Smooth Lysingea, we are in a deficit. Our compliance is just 25%. But as Craig pointed out, and Ed stated as well, we impacted a single occurrence of 6 plants, and we have 27.5 million plants protected. And so I wouldn't say that we're out of compliance. We're going to be creative. We have to think about what we've actually conserved versus what we've impacted. And then the same goes for Most Beautiful Jewelflower. We've impacted a single occurrence of 110 plants, but we've protected 3.1 million plants. Okay. Revenues. So here we look at year-over-year fee versus non-fee revenues. So not, for fee revenues, that's actual fees paid by projects that impact, that are covered by the program. For non-fee revenues, that includes all grants the Habitat Agency has received, as well as other people have received to implement the Habitat Plan. So those could be grants, for example, that OSA received to buy Coyote Ridge, that we have a conservation easement over. So for our permit program, we track that as a revenue because the Habitat Plan assumed that some land would be acquired by other people. And so we track that as part of our permit compliance reporting. So during the first 2 years, we had about $17.8 million in revenue. And I should actually say funding rather than revenue, so I'm just going to say funding. $8.3 million in the third year, and then $4.6 million in year 4. So that's a total of $30.6 million that have been used to fund the Habitat Plan program. So for fees, in years 1 and 2, we collected $8.8 million in fees and $8.9 million in non-fee funding. In year 3, it was $4.8 million in fees and $3.5 million in non-fee funding. And then in year 4, $3.1 million in fees and $1.5 million in non-fee funding. So that totals $16.7 million in fees and $13.9 million in fees. The Habitat Plan assumes 55% of the funding will come from fees, and then that non-fee funding will be 45%. Right now, we're at 52-48, so we're pretty close to what the Habitat Plan assumed.
And just real quick, there was, unfortunately, because we weren't successful in acquiring Richmond Ranch or Rancho El Toro, the non-fee revenues would have been a lot higher. Would have gotten money from the Moore Foundation, Nature Conservancy with the Packard funding, as well as money from the Water District and the Bureau of Rec, Federal Bureau of Rec. So those monies unfortunately went bye-bye. So a lot of our non-fee revenues, when I report them to you, like Tara said, these are different numbers. They had strings attached to them. Some of them, you had to buy this piece of property or something. So those opportunities will come along again, but unfortunately that money was secured, and then because we didn't acquire the land, it was lost. Yep.
So I understand the non-fee money, it fluctuates depending on the project. But the fee money with the boom that's going on in this area, I don't quite understand the downtrend, and I know that some projects haven't come through yet, and we're waiting on them. But you look around and the place is exploding, and you're reading the paper about all the development projects going on. So
Right.
explain where I'm off there.
Part of it was last-minute negotiations with the city of San Jose, which resulted in an errata. So an errata is like, if you don't know, it's kind of like an appendix with corrections to the plan. And there were all these stipulations that Mayor Reed insisted upon. So a lot of the development in North San Jose, we haven't collected a dime on it, because there was one thing he insisted upon was anything that had a pre-existing development agreement was exempt from the plan.
Pipeline.
I remember that, but so all those projects?
Most of them.
Really?
Very few in North San Jose. Then there was also the pipeline project. So
Right.
any project that pulled its grading permit before August 1st, 2014 was exempt from plan fees. That was also from Mayor Reed.
I remember
And I don't even know how many millions in revenue we were unable to capture because of that.
Should be catching up on that pretty soon.
We
right?
are, and that's why this year it's going to be 10 million. So Tara's reporting on last year.
Right.
Yeah. So this year we're going to get about 10 million in fees.
So that pipeline is what's created this downtrend, but
Yes.
it should start picking up.
It should start picking up. Yep. And then There's Public Works Department projects that are in the pipeline with VTA and the county that kind of keep stumbling along. Yeah, Tara's doing a graphic for you.
That's this next year for fees.
The catch-up provision.
Yeah. And like I said earlier, a lot of it's happening in already developed areas, and so we're only getting nitrogen deposition fees from those projects rather than the land cover fees, which are more money. Now I have to figure out how to erase that.
But on the good news, there wasn't a lot of natural habitat land converted to something else.
And so this graph kind of shows you how important Ed's trips to Washington DC are, and the certainty of doing land acquisition deals. So you can see in years 1 and 2, that's the year that we acquired Coyote Ridge. So there was a lot of grant funding that went into that. And you're seeing funding from the feds, state, and private funding. In years 3 and 4, we haven't acquired any land that we've had to pay for. We've been getting grants, we've been setting it aside. So in year 3, you see that $2 million federal grant was our Section 6. We didn't see another Section 6 this past year, so there was no opportunity for us to get that other $2 million. Nor do we have did we close on a land deal. So you would have seen more grant funding in year 3 and year 4 had we closed on an acquisition. I'm going to just go through these quickly because we've talked a lot about this stuff. But here I just want to show you that our partners are actually receiving most of the grants. So we've only acquired about 20% of the grant funding ourselves, where our partners, and this is mostly the Open Space Authority, has gotten about 75% of the funding, with about 5% going to other folks that are doing the research projects.
But the grant funding that you're talking about, the OSA receiving it.
So that goes to still our plan implementation. So
Yeah.
that was money they received for Coyote Ridge, and it's money they've received through the LAG grant program.
Okay,
And
but-
also the Bureau of Rec grant to improve the grazing infrastructure on Coyote Ridge that we co-wrote with them.
So I'm just trying to suss out a little bit between what Ed said earlier about his, because you're mentioning, his advocacy, his trips to Washington. So what I'm wondering here is it just because it's, OSA's been luckier and it's being siphoned off maybe through them, or is it more an issue of we're seeing just with the current administration, is it a mixed bag of things that are going on? Because is it, we're losing some of that money and that's why we're looking at it like that in year 4, because we cannot acquire?
One, it's losing the money. So we actually our program, the Habitat Plan, was awarded 2 Bureau of Rec grants. We had $1 million for Richmond Ranch, and the OSA also got $1 million grant for Coyote Ridge. But we lost our $1 million grant. They still have theirs. We still benefit from that.
You lost it because you couldn't acquire?
Acquire it.
Okay, all
And
right.
they couldn't transfer it to another property. We
Okay.
talked to them about doing that.
All right.
Look, years 1 and 2, that includes a Bureau of Rec grant. And part of it was like the Habitat Agency wasn't up and running yet. And so OSA almost was like getting grants on the behalf of the Habitat Agency at that point,
Right.
using the NCCP to get funding for their projects. And so our regulators at U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and Fish and Game were pushing money to them to acquire Coyote Ridge. So it was all specifically targeting that property. Had we been in existence then, that money would have shifted to us. Or could have, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that property, Coyote Ridge, 15.7 million, then they use that heritage tax credit program, which the UTC Corporation wanted to use. So then the actual money that was paid back to the state was just under 9 million. Of that, 2/3 of that funding was a result of the existence of the Habitat Plan. But like Tara noted, the grants were put together by the Nature Conservancy and OSA, and Kay Goody, a real advocate for this plan, formerly with the Fish and Wildlife Service, was very instrumental in making sure that the Bureau of Rec money came our way. So that's, it sort of gets lost, that story, but I think Tara did a great job sort of saying, well, if we were here, we probably would have got that money. But that's why this MOU is so important, because none of us can do this alone, given everything that we hear about land costs and changing political
Landscape, sure.
dynamics. Yeah.
I'm almost done with the money stuff. Okay, so expenditures, this is also another way. I had lots of words, I have lots of numbers on the slides. So we had our expenditures for years 1 and 2, and this includes our partners' expenditures. So this is looking at the program as a whole, not just the Habitat Agency expenditures. So year 1 and 2, we acquired Coyote Ridge. $10.7 million went into that. And you can see that our expenditures that year were just kind of staffing, getting going in the gray. So our expenditures year to year are in the gray. That's consistent with what you see with Ed's numbers. But here I look at like what's the larger program expenditures. Year 3, $2.2 million. So this includes our money plus grant expenditures by partners. And years 4, $3.2 million. So a total of $16 million across the first 4 years of our program is the cost of our program, a true cost of program implementation. And so you can see here the year-over-year Habitat Agency expenditures totaling $7.2 million. Land acquisition by our partners, which is Coyote Ridge, is $8.6 million. And then grants that have been expended by our partners are about $234,000. So I was like, what if I put all the numbers together? What good does it tell you? So we are about 8% through our permit term, year 4. And so the habitat plan assumes a certain level of everything across the 50 years. So I just put it on a 100% scale. So if we're 8% through our permit term, are we 8% on everything else as well? So for permanent impacts, the target, I guess for impacts, you only have a target, but our limit is about 18,000 acres, and we're about 1,300 acres into that. So our permanent impacts are progressing at a constant rate. For temporary impacts, they're lower. We've had 206 permanent temporary impacts, while we are allowed 2,200 acres of impacts. For conservation, it's 18,012 acres for 34,580 acres. This is lower than our reserve system size because some of our reserve system lands have easements on them, either for access or for like PG&E has easements on them, and so we have to take that out of our conservation accounting. We have not enrolled any existing open space, so that's a 0. But once we get Clara, that's about 2,000 acres, so we'll have made progress on that. For fee funding, we've had $16 million over a permit term expectation of $364 million. And this is what I wanted to point out before. So we haven't, a lot of the impacts have been in urban areas, which don't pay a lot of fees. So that's why the impacts versus fee funding, there's discrepancy between that. And also county projects, public county projects don't pay fees because of their existing open space enrollment. So some of those impacts are their impacts. And that's why you see that discrepancy.
Yeah, so that's why I was a little confused with the existing open space enrollment, because I thought we had some of that. I thought that was actually happening.
It's happening, but it hasn't happened.
Okay.
It's been challenging. That's about all I can say publicly.
Okay.
Yeah. We've been working on that for
Maybe
years.
maybe it's because I just remember
I know,
meetings where
we
you seemed
also-
very hopeful, and maybe
we
in
also
my mind I
remember a very
translated
hopeful
that into,
time.
oh, it's happening.
Yes.
And like work's been done.
Work's been done, we had baseline surveys
Yeah.
thinking that we'd have it enrolled by now. We don't. And this graph shows it plainly.
And that's part of the reason why we're off on lands protected too. Yeah.
So those folks that are government agencies of which they are co-permittees and you're having issues with them, are they not, or maybe is this a question for the governing board to really pay attention to that and really wonder why this is not happening and what's the agency that they are heading up? Why are we having this difficulty?
I have some of, yes, it's,
Okay.
it's not always a smooth marriage. I'm hoping that this last go-around with edits to how they want to see the conservation easement, mainly what is kind of integrated in the exhibit, because that's the allowable uses, which is important for parks, that we have crossed a major river, the Rubicon, with them on this, and that they, I'm cautiously optimistic that this is going to happen. If you had asked me 6 months ago, I would have given you the opposite answer.
Right.
And then bringing it up to the governing board was going to be, well, I was going to talk privately to county supervisors, and then bring it up to the governing board as a permit compliance challenge.
Okay.
And either they got to pay the fees or they got to enroll the land, one or the other. So
Yeah, because I would
I'm
think at
hoping-
this
I'm
point in
hoping we're-
time,
Yes, so 6 months
their
ago, I would have
impacts are
been very
happening,
negative.
and yet
I
we're,
would have been very negative 6
Yeah.
months ago, but I'm somewhat positive now that it's going to happen.
that would entertain the question, would it not, as if they're having these impacts and you're still essentially not
Yes,
having the open enrollment, that's where we're sort of, aren't we kind of falling out of compliance then?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Yes.
all right, okay.
with plant
I
occurrence
understand-
protection.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure one of their projects is the reason why we're out of compliance with plants, I think. So, but yeah, protection of plant occurrences is critical. The acres is critical.
I'm glad you picked up on the purpose of my,
You see? It was roasting in the office.
Yeah, if it isn't one of them, it's another one. I really mean this. I love meeting with you guys because you ask probing questions. You get into the details and things. You want to know what's going on. So it's, you keep me on my toes and I like that. So thank you.
Want to make sure you're earning that salary that we look at.
no, when I originally put this together, I showed it to, because we had just finished doing all the compliance for the annual report internally, and Jill was like, what about existing space enrollment? You should put that on that graph. I was like, I didn't even think about that, because there's a 0, but it does.
And it's an important
It's an
statistic.
important-
Very telling.
I was like,
yeah.
I want too many things on here.
This is a really nice chart.
Yes.
And then, so non-fee funding, we've got about 5% what the plan anticipates. And then our expenditures, and remember, this is not just our expenditures, but our partners' expenditures too, is about 3%. And that will jump once we have more land.
Before you move on, I have this thing with numbers. I see things in numbers. So
Good.
your second item, that's not 2%, it should be 9%.
Correct,
Either
yeah.
that or
I
your
just
numbers
noticed
are
that
wrong.
too. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's good news, unless the numbers are wrong.
now I'll fix that. Oh, good. No. Something's wrong.
But that's a good thing, because that puts you above the 8% line on one of them.
Kind of. It's more impacts than.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I noticed that too yeah. And I reviewed this and I missed it when I reviewed
I
it.
must, there's probably, I'm like, what does the graph say on the inside?
It's a very good presentation, I got to admit, nice graphics.
I just want to follow up that. So actually our impacts are kind of tracking, but for some reason the fees aren't. And I think you're saying, well, that's because a lot of these projects are not paying, the urban. all the urban projects and then the San Jose projects you mentioned in the north, in
Yeah.
North San Jose.
Yeah, yeah. I can't even, I think it's tens of millions we haven't collected because of those changes that were important to the Mayor Reed.
Yeah.
Well, won't this sort of be highlighted when you do the periodic assessment next year?
Yeah, probably. I did, the whole errata thing, I talked to the board about this. So they try to balance so many different things. They listened. It'll be interesting how they react to the zero, because Tara hasn't shown them this presentation yet.
That's good.
I'm glad you guys paid attention.
I'm starting to message to them that we're having some issues with this, so they won't be completely out of the blue, but I think hopefully they have some same questions that you do about the zero.
Well, if they don't, you can just say, by the way, Zach brought up this really interesting thing. Sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you.
go ahead.
Just a quick question. So a project like, what's the one there by Capitol Expressway, Communication Hill, that's been going on since probably right around the time that
Yes.
we started talking about. Does it get exempt through the pipeline?
No, that's one that was not exempt. And they paid fees in 2015, and they paid more fees this fiscal year.
Right, because they continued to extend that project, you know?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And the good thing about that is it affecting low-quality serpentine, and the monies will be used to manage and protect higher-quality serpentine. At least that's the plan. Yeah.
And I know back in the early stages of the plan, there was a lot of talk about creating all this infill development in the downtown area and creating, more emphasis on trying to do that. But if all we're collecting is a nitrogen deposition fee, then is something missing, or was that part of the plan all along, was to sort of take the hit on any downtown development with just a nitrogen deposition fee and no real impacts?
Yeah, most of the downtown development, let's say what Google's proposing, it's on what we would call existing urban. So there's nothing other than nitrogen that would trigger it. So it's sort of incentivizing smart growth, new urbanism, mixed use, the kind of stuff that would lead to less development in the farm land and on the natural land. So so as to your question, there's still, because San Jose is such a sprawling city, there's still a lot of what a planner might call infill, but it's still occurring in land that is either Zone A or Zone B per our plan. Okay. So it's still so San Jose is still triggering a lot of impacts to more open land, whether it's farmland or natural land.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
I have just a different question. So I was on the stakeholder group, Greg was on the stakeholder group. In terms of outreach for this plan, do we just post this on the website, or are we kind of trying to reach back to some of the, maybe the organizations that participated, say in the stakeholder group, or maybe there's other kind of stakeholder groups that would really both appreciate and might be willing to kind of look at more detail at some of the particular sections in their area of interest, like the amphibian people, Native Plant Society. So I was just really a question about outreach. Is there maybe there's some groups that we should specifically try to make sure they are aware of this and.
Yeah, I don't know, Tara probably knows this, I don't know who was originally on the stakeholder group, but that'd be a good idea to share that with them.
Yeah, because it's one thing to put it on the website, but it's another thing to kind of go, here's our, We invested some time in this, and here's what we're doing.
Are you saying you want more people to attend this meeting?
Well, it'd be nice to attend a meeting, but, even just to get an email that kind of, there are EDs that go, here's the annual report.
Yeah, Tara does do a distribution, but we could do a more robust one. Yeah, we could reach out to, I wasn't around back then, so I'm not sure who was all on it, but we'll send it to, we haven't sent this out yet.
Okay.
Yeah. And we sent it to the wildlife agencies and stuff like that.
Because it's a humongous document, and,
Yeah.
So it might be interesting. You might get more attention if, people who, you had people that were really interested in specific areas.
Yeah,
They might look at.
yeah.
Because to do it in one sitting, it's a little bit.
And I'm perfectly comfortable with all of you, because you represent different groups too, of sharing this. So please do, whether it's ranchers or farmers or environmental groups or business community or however you want to share this, please do.
Okay. Anything else? The next slide is just a thank you.
Kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah.
So.
So thank you to to you all, as well as to all of the co-permittees, and then our local partners and consultants that help us implement the plan.
Thank you, Tara,
Takes a
for putting that
village.
together. That was, it was a lot of work, no doubt.
Very well done.
You guys, if you have any more questions, now's your time.
You really want more?
And so, speaking to like the more scientific stuff, we'll have, Nomad's gonna present on the Clara surveys at the next pack, and then Janelle will, from the Water District, Janelle Hillman will talk about the Cardicinothis creation project at the next pack. This will be more science-focused.
Sorry to overwhelm you with all process focus, like the budget and,
That's all good.
yeah.
Then maybe the next one, we can talk about San Felipe Creek, have pictures of us actually restored the creek. All right, thank you.
Okay, before we move on, Doug?
Your on-track slide,
Okay,
-2.
thanks.
Thank you.
Do I have other math errors in here?
As you know, the reward for good work is more work. Thank you, Chair. Good evening, committee members and staff. For the record, my name is Doug Muirhead. I live in Morgan Hill. This slide kind of triggered a thought in me. I don't have a good feeling for the nonlinear nature of your progress.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if something like this, if we had little lines for year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 that, are there...
Like chunks?
Yeah. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
kind of a random thought, but, there have been other times that you've mentioned, your challenges, things didn't happen,
Mm-hmm.
and, I like numbers and I like pictures, and this is a great picture. But I'm just wondering if there's a way to kind of help us understand that you...
Okay, yeah, that would be,
Chunky, I guess is a good word, so, just
And not only,
yeah.
Understand, but make a point.
Well, yeah, because I mean, what I'd really like to see is you looking into the future,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
and maybe you can with a really large, asterisk saying, might not get it 100% right, forecasting 50 years
Right.
out, but, so, how you've done, and then as you say, trying also, to look ahead. So just, I don't have an answer, so I'm just gonna,
Yeah, the
leave
plan,
a suggestion hanging out.
yeah, the plan does projections of where we're supposed to be in increments. So we could show you that stuff from the plan, and then we
That
could
would
try
be
to
real
interpret, where we think, well, this is what the plan says, this is what we think is gonna happen. Yeah, we can do that. Yes.
Good suggestion.
I don't think I can make it on one graph, that's all I'm
Yeah,
saying.
we'll have to do other graphs, yeah. Or more graphs.
It'll be hard.
No, but the graphs make it easy to see and digest.
Yeah. And on the plan projections, we can say, hey, this is what the plan projected in year 5, which is what Tara's doing here. But we can also say, this is what it's projecting in year 10, and how I look in a crystal ball, or Tara, and we can maybe help you to say, okay, this is where we think we're going. I wish I knew.
Ed, you're back up.
I'm back up. So thank you for your patience, and it's a long meeting tonight, and I appreciate you guys being
I
here.
had one
and,
quick question.
Yes.
This little flyer about advertising,
Yes.
you're looking for land?
Yes.
How's it being used?
Been sent out.
Been mailed out? Have
Yes.
you ever thought about putting that in the Morgan Hill and the Gilroy newspaper?
No, because we wanted to be more targeted. I
Oh.
didn't want
You don't know who,
somebody
you don't
with 5 acres calling me,
Tell them no.
unless they have rare plants. So,
Well, there's the realtors,
yes,
there's
We'll have you guys look at the picture.
maybe the Morgan Hill Chamber Economic Development Committee, maybe the Gilroy Chamber Government Relations Committee that are kind of like-minded focus. And for a 10-minute, 5-minute presentation on what we are, who we are, and where we're taking it. And tomorrow I'll send you contact numbers.
Thank you.
For the appropriate folk.
yeah, no, I'd be fine with presenting to those groups. It's something that Supervisor Wasserman mentioned too, reaching out to the business community.
And I can I make one more quick piece of
Absolutely.
information, very short.
Yes.
You mentioned the restoration project for the Berwyn Owls going to British Columbia. Some of you know I work with the local Morgan Hill Wildlife Educational Rehabilitation Center. And we got in an injured owl that was found right here in South Morgan
I heard
Hill.
about that.
And we rehabilitated, it would look healthy, it was eating, and so we connected with Phil up at Shoreline and set up one of the cages that they do up in Canada. And we're going to leave the owl in there for 14 days. And on the 13th afternoon, we went in, the owl was doing great. It was eating the mice every day, it was foraging, and it looked like we had a great success. And the day before we were going to release it, it had died in the cage.
It died of natural causes or something?
Well, it died. We don't know if it had injury, because it was found on the road, on Monterey Road. So it's just an interesting thing that we have had one occasion to try, and it worked for 13 days. We were going to release it the next day out on the Shoreline property because it was doing so well, and it just missed it by one day. So for the other board members that didn't know of it, it wasn't a publicly known thing. It was kind of it wasn't a secret, it just wasn't publicly known. So I just wanted to let everybody know that we did get one attempt at that, and we almost made it, but didn't quite.
Good try. I knew it died, but I didn't know it had died in the enclosure.
Yeah, we put it in the enclosure, and I was lucky enough to get to help with that, which was
Thank
so
you.
freaking cool.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry.
Well, the whole work thing is,
The what?
the whole work, W-E-R.
Oh, yeah. I've been with them 5 years now, yeah, so, anyway. If anybody wants to go clean bird poop every Monday morning with me, you're welcome.
Or bring them mice. Okay,
So I'll give you an advocacy update. So I was in Sacramento on the 24th, and I met with primarily staff of all our delegation, but I did have a sit-down meeting with Senator Bell and with Senator Wajkowski. And they're very supportive of what we do. We were reaching out to them for support of the Prop 68, and these are the things we talked about in detail with them. Bell is, he could tell you every little nook and cranny about this county, so I'm sure some of you have talked to him. And talking to Wachowski, he's very passionate about climate change, and I had a good discussion with him. I was there with other members of the California Coalition, so they met with their representatives from various areas from Southern California and Northern California. So it was a very successful meeting. These are some of the things we talked about I thanked them for their support for Prop 68. And we talked about the governor's proposal to fund Department of Fish and Wildlife with additional monies, and we said we really support that, especially staff people to help out with NCCP implementation. And we talked about stuff related to greenhouse gas funding and not to discriminate between conservation easement and fee title acquisition. And I gave the example of most of the landowners around here that I've had negotiations with, or the OSA, there's very few that are interested in selling a conservation easement to us. Most want to sell fee title. They want to move out of the area, buy ranch land somewhere else. They're retiring, whatever their motivation is, they're leaving. They're not interested in putting a conservation easement on their ranch, or if they're hobby farmers, they just own a bunch of acres. And that's been, the UTC Corporation's not interested in doing a conservation easement. So some of the greenhouse gas funding has said you can only purchase conservation easements on the land, and it's driving us all crazy because there's just not the market for that, at least not in Southern California, not in our county. We were told by TNC lobbyist and by Bill Craven that might have been a mistake in the legislation, and they're going to try to change that. So it was a very productive meeting, and I would say we have a very engaged local delegation that some of you have met with in your work, and I got as much out of it as I hope they did. And one of the things that, I'll pass this around, that we left, could you hand this to them? This is a leave behind that we did, and you could do this one for and the next two are stuff that we left behind in Washington. So the trip in Washington, these are a list of the people that I met with, either just me or me and people representing HCPs in California and in Texas, along with Defenders of Wildlife and the Nature Conservancy, both the state chapter and the federal Nature Conservancy. And we talked primarily about Section 6 funding, which I sort of was sharing with you earlier, permit integration, and Department of Interior staffing. So, like I said, there wasn't anybody who said they don't like the Section 6 program. There wasn't anybody who said they don't like HCPs, but it is not supported by this administration. So the 2016-17 budget was the last budget of President Obama. So there was both the Congress and the administration were aligned in agreement on funding for Section 6. In this budget cycle, 17-18, the administration had $0 in it. Congress put back funding to be equal to what it was in the 16-17 budget. In this year, the administration again put zero money in it, and Congress put in more money than was appropriated last year. Both Republican and Democrats in Congress like this program, but Secretary Zinke has concerns about how federal money is spent, and he's concerned about the federal government accumulating more land. But this isn't a program where the federal government's buying the land. It's local government buying the land, and it's leveraging local and state monies. The staff people we met with, and primarily Republican staff people, they get it. But there is some sort of disconnect coming from Zinke and his vision of how Department of Interior should do business. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. This appraiser has contacted Fish and Wildlife staff in Sacramento, asking a lot of questions about the land that we have listed in our grant applications, and what's the appraised value for that land, and what's the current use of that land, and is public access going to be allowed on the land, and we have answered all those questions. We went through another round of questions because Sergeant Ranch was included in one of the grants, and they asked, well, what's the current use? And I said, well, there's oil production and there's grazing. That's kind of what's going on out there. And so they came back and said, well, will you continue oil production on the property? And the answer is, of course, yes, because they have existing.
Can't take that away from them. Yeah.
I couldn't stop it regardless.
Yeah.
And would we continue grazing? Again, the answer is yes, because that's an important management tool for us. So I don't know if answering yes to those two questions will free up the money. We also, if we acquire the land jointly with Parks or OSA or somebody else who wants public access, we're not against that. Coyote Ridge has coyote access, public access. Trying to work through that issue with county parks on Calero. The only thing we ask is that public access isn't across the entire property and people are stomping on rare plants and swimming in ponds with endangered species. So that's kind of, the only thing we ask. So that's kind of where we were at on the Washington trip. I wish I could come back and report success, but I've been told in past trips there, I've gone 3 of the 4 years I've worked here, that without us going back, the funding would have disappeared. So 1 year, the funding was cut by Senator Reed from Rhode Island, a Democrat, and we worked with Republicans and the 2 Democratic senators in California to put funding back in there, to bring it up to levels. So it's not just a Republican president that's not always sure how this money's spent. It's also Democratic senators from eastern states who don't know this is an important western states program. So we always have to be vigilant, and unfortunately, on something that is promoting the administration's agenda of this streamlining permitting, infrastructure development, and like I said, these Republican staff people got it, but there's a new sheriff in town, so to speak, and he wears a big hat, and he's from Montana, so we did not meet with him. He did not take a meeting with us, and the appraiser from Montana did not take a meeting with us, but we tried. So with the grant updates, just to let you know, we submitted 2 grants, one to the Water District. I forget what D it was D2 or D5 or for $500,000. And we submitted a Prop 1 grant to the Coastal Conservancy for, I think, $445,000 to do a creek restoration project on Pacheco Creek. So this is very different than kids planting trees. This is looking at the hydrology of the creek, trying to improve habitat for steelhead, floodplain connectivity, and being such a flashy, dynamic system that Pacheco Creek is. We'll have to do a lot of good due diligence to make sure whatever we do won't get blown out in the next storm. So we'll see if we're successful in getting those grants, and that would go a long way to helping us try to do a major restoration project out there. Because we have over a mile of creek frontage. And if we're successful in either putting easements or acquiring on any of our neighbors' property along that creek, then that'll be that much more habitat that we can work on enhancing. I talked about Section 6. So land acquisitions. The first thing I'll talk about, since Craig brought this up, This is a mailer we sent out in mid-March that went out to just under 400 landowners in Santa Clara County. And we had 40 individuals express interest in selling their land to us, and there's around 20 that we are interested in potentially buying. And given our budget, how much money we have available, there's maybe 3 to 5, depending on which properties we acquire, that we actually could acquire. Some of the land was farmland, cropland, which is not our area of interest, but we sent on that information to the county and OSA, who are interested in farmland. They have the SOC program money, that they're interested in trying to buy farmland. And it's something, Craig, I should probably talk to your successor about if any of these lands you all would be interested in. But I knew the county had that SOC funding and OSA had that SOC funding. I don't know, did you get one of these, Kyle? I told them not to send it to you. I didn't want them to
Someone
bother.
asked me about it.
I didn't want them to bother you. I told them, don't send it to Kyle. So.
I've got a question. You know, when it was mentioned, have you put,
To a accountants meeting?
Oh, are they mad at me?
No,
Oh, good. Yeah.
but if you have 20 already.
No, I'd be glad to come to county, because I don't know if the 20 are the right 20, to be blunt. Yeah. No, I would like to come to a cattleman's
Okay.
meeting. Yeah,
I'll ask them.
thank you.
I just had the question because it was mentioned, putting it in the local paper, and you said, well, we don't want a very small acreage. So is there a minimum acreage you're looking for? Because that's not made clear here.
Yeah, we sent this out to properties that were adjacent to some open space areas. So we didn't exclude, there's some properties in the Tulare Hill area
Okay.
and the Santa Teresa Park area, which we targeted. And actually, we put in some offers. I can't get into details. There were some other properties that were known important for connectivity and for steelhead areas that we also targeted. The thing I was concerned about was if we sent it out to too many people, we'd be overwhelmed.
Be fielding calls and spending
Yeah.
time doing that.
And we have a broker who's experienced doing this work around the state, so he has the capacity. I mentioned the county person that's helping out. So, there's only so much we can do. We tried to focus on areas that were in the preferred reserve area or near that.
Yeah. So I guess my question was, you don't really have a bias or you wouldn't reject a property that might be a small amount of acreage, depending obviously on its level of importance.
Exactly. So if it had the rare plants or burrowing owls,
Sure.
or if it was adjacent to, let's say Henry Coe or Calero, then yes, we'd be interested. Yep.
Thanks, just wanted
Yep.
clarity.
Yep. Yes.
So actually, I mean, you've kind of answered the question I had, but, because when I saw this, I was kind of thinking of, how does this fit in with our conservation strategy, and you've kind of explained that. I mean, do you have or do we have documented kind of the criteria that you've just expressed verbally?
I didn't, so this was a discussion between me and the broker and his team about who to reach and try to kind of target some, try to target more large parcels, but also, like Julie says, not to ignore, because there's a small holding on Coyote Ridge that actually we sent a biologist out today to see if the rare plants are there, because it has serpentine. So if that property has serpentine, or has the plants, we'll put an offer in on it. So, so the criteria is obviously the bigger the better.
Yeah.
But if it's adjacent to something that's envisioned to be part of the reserve system, and adjacency is critical, and also for connectivity, that's the other critical thing. Is it in a critical linkage? So it might be small, but it's important for wildlife passage.
Yeah, I just remember back in the stakeholder group, I mean, there was like an extended discussion at one of our meetings about just kind of basic principles of conservation biology.
Yes.
You know, shape and,
Right.
you know, and I mean, you're kind of highlighting some of the, you know, points that I remember from that discussion.
Yeah.
You know, round versus long and skinny. And
Right, long and skinny is not
Notice-
necessarily good.
I
and
can chime in,
yes,
too.
rough
yeah.
stuff like that.
So that's, once we skid a property, that's what Robin's analysis looks at, is all those reserve design principles and the habitat values, those we have a specific parcel assessment that we do,
I see.
or
So
property
that really is
assessment.
embedded in our processes
Yes.
that we go
Yeah.
through. Okay. Great, thank you.
But yeah, we try to follow those principles. To the chagrin of some people, especially people who want to do land in lieu with us.
So Ed, your report's finished?
I am.
Right,
Oh,
is it?
high-speed rail, sorry.
Yeah,
I
oh,
promised Julie I'd talk about high-speed rail. So, my frustration has been the lack of focus on Pacheco Pass, but I feel Post and OSA have done an outstanding job getting high-speed rail to come up with some creative kind of consensus options for Coyote Valley and trying to enhance connectivity in Coyote Valley by either improving existing structures or putting in new ones. And
As a form of mitigation?
yes, as a
Okay.
form of mitigation for whatever alternative is built.
Okay.
As well as a fair share for overpass, which I don't know if that'll happen, but
Overpass, are we talking about a wildlife overpass?
a wildlife
Okay,
overpass.
cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
yeah.
a lot of money.
Yep, yep. So today we met with, so I've voiced this to high-speed rail, saying numerous times, I think they're finally getting it, because there's a real regulatory nexus for what they're doing in Pacheco Pass. Because Pacheco Pass is a landscape of large ranches, small ranchettes along a somewhat untouched creek, and large public lands to the north, Henrico and those wildlife areas. So it's a landscape where it's a working landscape, and it's a publicly protected landscape. The train's coming in there, and it's the 800-pound gorilla. They're talking about cut and fill over 2.5 miles along Highway 152, which will affect the Burdett's property, may affect our property, and it's going to lead to a decrease in wildlife permeability, so wildlife movement across that landscape. They're also affecting listed species. Where there's less of that nexus in Coyote Valley, there's a huge nexus of it, and all the regulators I met with get it. Whether it's Steelhead, the NOAA people, or the wildlife agencies with the terrestrial stuff. So I'm hoping that this is a turning point, because I've also brought it up to Senator Bell and to Assemblyperson Stone in person, saying, I may come back to you because I may need help with this and how it's impacting a relatively untouched landscape of Pacheco Pass. Not to minimize Coyote Valley, but I think too much focus has been on Coyote Valley, and I've made that clear to them. And so we'll see how this all plays out, but there's going to be some real impacts in Pacheco Pass.
Yeah, and you're looking at it from more the endangered species lens when you're saying Coyote
Yes.
Valley versus Pacheco.
Correct. Yeah, from a connectivity standpoint, it's it's different. There's different challenges to wildlife movement in both corridors. But there's more of a net loss of permeability in Pacheco Pass, where Coyote Valley, I think there's a real opportunity to make things better. Pacheco Pass is they need to mitigate for making things worse.
Okay.
Yeah, that's kind of my take on it.
Any questions?
One more question and comment.
Yes.
The comment is, I want to thank Tara and Jerry for going out and to the Clara Ponds and the seep. That was really cool. I'd seen pictures and I heard you talk about it, but to actually go see them and what's being done was really cool. Good job out there. I appreciate that. So my question is, can we go out to Pacheco Creek someday?
Sure.
When?
Do you want to?
Pick a date? No, I would like to go out and see it.
Well,
and I don't want to trespass.
I was thinking
but-
we need to do a field trip with you guys. Maybe instead of a board meeting, we do a field trip.
Oh.
And we could
I
take
vote
you
yes for
to,
that.
we could take you to San Felipe once it's complete, the construction, and take you to Pacheco. I mean, that's a lot of territory to cover, so maybe we got to do 2 field trips.
Or one a year.
Yeah, one a year.
Now, so if it works out, whether it's a meeting or just to go up, but I'd love to see both those areas, so.
Yeah, no,
Just
we
a
can.
request.
Yeah, I think Jerry and Tara were talking about taking people out to Pacheco Creek next year, and like happened with Clara this year. But I think taking the committee out there would be a good idea, one of these properties, and show you the work that we've done.
And offer it to the implementation and
Yeah.
governing board as well.
Yes.
Because, I mean, I think this group probably has a greater connection to the land and the creek and the animals than the other.
Oh, yes. No, I think we should instead of having a board meeting, we'll do a field trip. And we can talk about some
At
board.
night?
Well, in the summertime, sure.
All right, and we do
And
have one,
in November, no.
right,
So,
and we do have one more comment from the public.
Survey.
okay. And just one thing.
Feel like you want to make it from the
I
comfort
did-
of your home
I
over
did
there?
tell the regulators that we, the Habitat Agency, care about the alignment of high-speed rail throughout the plan area, which is the Pajaro, Pacheco, and Coyote Valley. So, but Pacheco has been ignored, but I'm hoping that's going to change.
Hey, Ed, real quick. Was it taken into consideration when the plan was developed, the impacts on the Pacheco watershed? Or is it something that'll have to be looked at different lens?
I mean, we knew high-speed rail was going to happen. I think when the plan was first being discussed, there was still the Altamont alternative being discussed. But its impact and how it interferes with the plan, it wasn't really talked about, was it?
Not covered.
And so the wildlife agencies will cover listed species that are affected there, but in order for us to get in on this, would we have to reassess listed species and impacts and all of
That's what we're trying to avoid, that how they mitigate and how they impact doesn't put us in non-compliance for our permit. So one of our big concerns is how they mitigate, where they mitigate, and how they avoid impacts. So if they do things that make things a lot worse and harder for us to achieve our conservation objectives, then that's something that we will raise pretty vehemently with the wildlife agencies who are involved in permitting high-speed rail. And I expressed that to them today. And I also told them that these linkages are important. These were identified in the plan as important linkages for wildlife movement, and how high-speed rail impacts it is they need to mitigate for it or not do it in some instances.
I was on the high-speed rail website, and I was looking at some of the pylons are dropping in, and they're tremendous,
Huge.
more than any bridge or, equivalent structure I've ever seen for a rail that's going to run just a few feet above the ground.
Oh, no, well, it's going to be the longest tunnel, too.
Yes.
Alignment has it going right through our reserve. Some of those pilings will be
So it's that close to the river? That's good.
Yeah, yeah, isn't it?
Those were some of our comments, was about not having like having the footings outside the river.
I know.
All right. Doug, your turn.
Thank you. Again, Doug Muirhead, Morgan Hill. A short info comment and then a second thank you. The information comment is, last year Supervisor Submidian created a federal advocacy task force at the county board level. They have consultants.
Sorry, that's my phone.
It's
Okay,
applause.
Sorry. Yes,
My time's up already?
yes, it is. Go sit back down.
So,
He has a quick finger.
yes, yes.
I'm trying to.
So it was interesting to me because, you know, they have county council there and they have their DC consultants there, Prime Consulting and some other people, just to kind of agonize about what's happening with the federal administration. And yesterday there was an agenda item where they discussed the Habitat Agency and the Section 6 problem. They didn't manage to resolve it. It was mostly, well, you know, we don't know what's going on. At least they're watching, and you're not alone for whatever that's worth. So I found that kind of interesting myself. The thank you, since one has already been said, is to thank both Tara and Jerry for being gracious hosts for the tour at Calero, for the implementation committee. I don't know which agencies were there. They didn't have little flags or anything, and I only recognized one person, Michael Rhodes, Natural Resource Manager from County Parks, who I got to know when he did stormwater for the Water District. But it was a great walk on a slightly cloudy day, and there were a couple people that really did have interesting technical questions, and they didn't stump Tara once. So it was a great afternoon, and I certainly would look forward to being able to tag along on future outdoor committee meetings. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay, we'll adjourn the meeting.
And thank you.
Thank you.
No, thank you
Thank
for your
you.
service. I mean it. You know, this isn't easy. What time is it? Almost 9 o'clock, yeah. So.
A great report.